Hi everybody, my name is Ikai Lan.
And my name is Kalyan Reddy.
And today we're going to be talking about app script triggers. So what are we going to be doing today? We're going to be doing a full-on, I want to call it's a show about app script triggers, where we're going to start talking about first what they are, where you'd want to use them, ways to run them, and we're going to move into a little bit of code. I'm not going to type too much code out, but I've been preparing some samples for you guys, and towards the end we're going to talk about patterns and things you can and can't do using triggers. So that's what we've got today for you guys. Oh, I have this thing in presentation mode. So let's go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.
And Kalyan's going to be he's going to be the guy here who's going to be asking questions and just making sure to I don't go too fast. Going to pace me. He's going to help me out. Okay. So first off, what are triggers? Triggers are a way for us to run code either in response to an event or non-interactively. When I say non-interactively, when I say interactive, what I mean is you've got the script editor where you can hit play. You can also run a script as a result of something going on in a script. You can have it attach a menu item, or you can invoke some code via a web application. So that's what I mean when I say interactive, as in there's a user that goes in and clicks some action or takes some action that causes some code to run. And this is one of the most common uses of app script, is that you want the user to be doing something before the app script fires. Now, you want to use triggers because you want to be able to, there are lots of cases where you want to run code and not have the user necessarily do something. So a really good example would be a clock-based trigger. So let's say that you wanted to run some code. You want to run a scheduled job every day at midnight or at 1 a.m. or every day at noon. Let's say that every day at noon I wanted to email everyone and say, hey, go to lunch, right? That's something you can do with trigger. Or if you want to set something up to run at a certain date or time, that's something you can do via what we call clock triggers. The second type of triggers are something that we call spreadsheet triggers. So we have these, they're called onInstall, onOpen, onEdit, and onFormSubmit. And we'll talk about these later, but what these allow you to do is to wire up code so that when something happens inside a spreadsheet, the code gets executed. So this is a very powerful technique, and you can build some really interesting application using some off-the-shelf components like spreadsheets for UI or forms for collecting user data, and you can wire these together using triggers so that you can build something that's a full-fledged application. So a really good example of something that we've done like this would be something like a help desk application. Or for those of you that have been to our app script events before, you've seen our sign-up sheets. That's just the Google form. But you're able to get a confirmation email. We'd also do some logic in the back end to send out reminder emails, as well as tell you if you're on the wait list or not. That's all done via app script, spreadsheets, and forms.
So if you're familiar with the Unix world, then the cloud-based triggers are kind of like a cron job where you can have a script execute at a certain time.
That's right. And do you have a Unix analogy for spreadsheets?
Not so much.
Just like bringing you into my trap here. So why don't we go ahead and show you guys how to set up some of these triggers. Let's go ahead and go to script editor right now. So I've written some code here. This is Kalyan. His email is gcal@google.com. Everybody knows this. He's very popular around here. And what I want to do is I want to really bother him, right? I just want to tell this guy that he's, I want to tell this guy that, hey, you're such a cool guy, right? I want to tell this guy every day. I want to tell him every 5 minutes. So I've written this function, and as you can see, I'm just using a standard mail app. So a mail app, you have a recipient, a subject, and a body of the email. So I want to email you every 5 minutes because, I want you to have high self-esteem. So let's go ahead and figure out how we can do that. Well, when you're in the script editor, and this is script.google.com, you click on Resources, Current Script Triggers, and you'll see that right now I have no triggers set up. And that's because I don't have any code yet, right? I haven't set this up yet. I do have code, excuse me. I'll click on No Trigger Setup. And which one of these do I want to select? I want to select email gcal. Now, one thing you might notice is that I've got a few other functions in here. That's because I want to go a little bit off topic, a little bit talk about public and private functions. This is something that's really useful to know. You'll see that I have a function here called public and private function. Private functions are functions that end with an underscore. When you have a function that ends with an underscore, you're telling AppScript that this is just for me. I don't ever want to be able to run this code. So when you click the drop down for running, you'll see that private function is not there and public function is. And the difference is an underscore between the function name and the parentheses. So that's one of the requirements of writing code that you want to execute inside a trigger, is that it must be public. You can't have an underscore in the name at the end of the function name. So again, let's go back to current project triggers and set one up. Now, I'm going to pick the function I want, and again, that's email gcal. And I've got a couple of options, but right now, since this script is not bound to a spreadsheet, that is, I didn't go to the spreadsheets editor and click Tools, Script Editor. I just went to script.google.com and started furiously hacking away. The only option I have is time-driven. And the next option I want to pick is, what kind of time-driven trigger is this? First off, I can pick a specific date and time, right? So you'll see that I want to enter a year, date, year, month, date, and a time. So what's a good day to remind you that you're such a cool guy? Well, let's
right now.
Nah, I don't think you deserve it yet. How about on the 25th of December, right? I mean, you're getting presents. You know, you're having the day off, drinking some eggnog. So let's remind you at 3 a.m. And you'll see that the field turns white because now this is a valid time, and I can save this thing, and that's when it'll email him. It's going to ask me for authorization, so I'm going to go ahead and authorize. You guys are all familiar with this screen. Close, and now I'm going to save the trigger. Remember, you must pass the authorization and then save it again. It's like the same way when you're running a script, you have to authorize and rerun the thing. So now, if I go to current script triggers, I'll see that, oh, there's an email set up to go out to you, and it's going to execute this code on December 25th.
So it's just going to execute it the one time on that date, and
that's right.
That's it.
That's right. And you know, you sounded disappointed there. So why don't we increase the frequency? When you create triggers, you can create many, many triggers to fire on a single function. So I'm going to add a new trigger, email gcal, and I'm going to make it time-driven, and I want this thing to run every hour. I don't think you deserve that. Let's set it to every 2 hours, right?
All right.
So I'm going to set it to every 2 hours. I'm going to hit save. And that's going to start emailing you every 2 hours. It's going to execute this code. So you can, in this type of trigger, you can put almost any kind of code in here that AppScript supports. So I'm using a very simple example to email you, but I could also edit a spreadsheet, right? So I can keep a log of all the times I've emailed you. I can also keep a Google Drive document. I can do a lot of different things. I can insert a row into a database via Cloud SQL and JDBC. Anything you can do inside an app script, you can basically do inside a trigger. I mean, obviously, you can't render a UI, but that would be silly, wouldn't it?
It's because there's no particular user
who's going to look at it? Who's going to look at it, right? If a tree falls in an empty forest, I don't know the rest of how that goes. Not very philosophical. So that's how you manually set up a trigger. But sometimes you want to be able to set up a trigger, and you want to be able to do it so that you can program, and you can program a trigger in. So for instance, let me show you guys how this would be done. So let me go ahead and excuse me. Let me go ahead and do this in code. So I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to call it schedule trigger. Right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a trigger builder to build something that'll also schedule something that'll email you every minute. How does that sound?
That sounds much better.
Let's go ahead and do this then. So let's say var builder equals script app dot new trigger. And the first parameter of new trigger is the function that you want this trigger to call. So the function I want this to call is email gcal. This must match the case. You know, everything in JavaScript everything in AppScript is case sensitive when you're writing code. So remember that if something is uppercase, you have to match a G, and if something's lowercase, you have to match it. So we're going to chain this, and we're going to say, let's make this a time-based trigger, right? So I'm going to make it time-based. Let's set this again. I'm hitting period every time, and AppScript Editor is smart enough to know, hey, this is a clock trigger builder type. Try saying that 10 times fast. And it'll pop up the functions I need to build this trigger. So when I say dot, I want this to be every, and you can see that as I type, it filters down the functions that match every minute. So let's make this every 1 minute. And let's go ahead, and that's it. So that's the trigger so far. And when you have a builder, you go ahead and you do builder dot create. And this returns a trigger. instance. But you don't have to necessarily do anything with a trigger. You don't have to return it. You could just say builder.create. In fact, a lot of people, what they do is at the end of this call, they'll simply say .create, and they won't even return a builder. So a very common thing I've seen people do is to do .create, and that's the end of it. But I want to show you guys that you can use a builder because builders are very, very powerful. Builders are a pattern that come from Java. They come from Java land, and they're best described in this one book called Effective Java by Joshua Block. The nice thing about builders is that they allow you to programmatically slowly construct a complex object. And this was intentionally built. This pattern exists to solve the problem of Java having lots of not having name parameters. So in some programming languages like Python, you can call a function and you can call a name parameter, right? You could say name is equal to ABC, value is equal to 1, 2, 3. But you can't do that in Java. So they created this builder pattern where what each of these functions returns is the builder object. So the trigger hasn't been created yet. You return an instance of the builder, and when you're done with the builder, you call builder.create to essentially finalize the object. So why is this nice? Well, let's say that we want to make it time-based, right? But we want to make it every few minutes, and we didn't know how many minutes we want the interval to be. Well, we could have a conditional that says if some conditional builder dot every 1 minute. And if there's a different conditional, I could say builder dot every 5 minutes.
So you could hook this up as a response to external conditions as well. Like you can pull data from an external source and change your trigger timers based on that.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. So you can do that with triggers. It's very, very cool. And that's typically what you use the builder pattern for, because a lot of times you'll have a lot of different conditionals, and instead of writing this out every time, you'll simply modify the builder in the way that you need it to change based on the current condition you're evaluating. I know it seems confusing, so just take a look at what I've done with the code here, and you'll see what I'm doing here. Now, obviously, this is always going to set to every minute. And that's because I'm doing an if true. So let's go ahead and remove that because that's kind of silly. So let's go ahead and select this. I'm going to save this. And now you'll see that once the code finishes saving, I'm going to do a drop down and I'm going to pick schedule trigger. I'm going to run this. I'm going to run this function. Again, I'm not running the email gcal function. I'm running the schedule trigger function. So I'm going to go ahead and click play, run. It's going to ask me for permission. I'm going to authorize it, close it. Now again, I haven't run this, I haven't actually scheduled the trigger yet. So this is going to create a trigger that runs every 1 minute. So when I go to resources, current script trigger, I'll see that, okay, I have the triggers I created before. Let's go ahead and delete these for clarification. So you see that there are no triggers set up, right? I'm going to run.
So all you've done so far is authorize it.
That's right. Thank you for the clarification. So I'm going to click run. It's going to run schedule trigger. And when I look in resources, current script triggers, boom, you'll see that I've programmatically created a trigger. And this is a very nice feature because sometimes you might want to create a trigger based on what someone is doing in a web app, what's happening in a spreadsheet. So you want lots of options. And being able to programmatically schedule triggers is really nice because, yeah, you have options, and you can be very flexible in scheduling when you want code to run. So let's talk about how we can use this in practice, right? So here I've set up a demo spreadsheet, right? And we call this fundraising. So this is just a basic Google spreadsheet. I've got 2 tabs, one for fundraising, one for donations, and we have a name and a funds raised. This is a very, very simple spreadsheet. I'm dynamically generating a chart from this data. So right now I have Arun as a slacker. He's only raised $20. I mean, he's a busy guy, right? So let's go ahead and let's say that he's raised $20,000. Well, he's totally blown up the chart now, so let's go ahead and lower that scale a little bit.
It's a good one for Arun.
He's back down to $40. That's a 100% increase in the funds that he's raised. So charts are really cool because you can just make changes and the chart will automatically update. So let's say that with this chart we want to send out a nightly notification that with the latest chart that says, hey, here's the latest status on fundraising. Well, how do we do that? We do that with triggers. So inside the spreadsheet, I'm going to go ahead and click Tools, like so. I'm going to go Script Editor. And this is going to open up the editor. It's not going to do it that fast. Oh, well, the reason it's doing this is because I had the tab open already, so it's just refreshing the tab. So this is the script that I have attached to the spreadsheet. All right, so I've written a function that emails that email as a report to myself. This is my test account. So ekai.land.test@gmail.com. Please don't ever email me at that email. I'll never see it. So let's walk through this code real quick. First off, if you've ever written code to attach to a spreadsheet before, you recognize this. You want to get the active spreadsheet, and we're storing in a variable SS. We're going to get the sheet by name. The sheet's name is fundraising because if you remember, it's down here in the lower left-hand corner. You see the name of the tabs, right? And the tab here is fundraising. So we're going to get all the charts for the sheet, and we'll say sheet.getCharts. We really only want the first one because there's only one. But when you say get charts, you can only return all the charts. Like right now, there isn't a way just to return one particular chart.
Nice.
So we're going to go ahead and create the email template. I'm doing something that's, I'm taking advantage of HTML template to render an HTML email template. A lot of times I see people, they're doing this in code. They're writing the template out in the script editor, or they're using a spreadsheet cell as the email template. And they're all advantages and disadvantages. I personally like to use a template because it lets me separate the view from the code. So like right here, you'll see I'm using HTML service.create template from file, report template. And I'm doing this, and if you've ever written any kind of HTML service apps before, this should look familiar. Because once I go to report template, you'll see, hey, it's just an HTML page, big H1 title, daily fundraising report. This is an HTML service standard where I can inject a variable, and the variable I'm injecting here is the date variable. I'm using the question mark equals notation to say whatever the string value of date is, inject it here. I'm doing something here. It's a little bit outside the scope of AppScript to talk about this, but I feel like it's worth talking about. It's inside an email, you can have inline images, and there are a couple of different ways of doing it. One of the ways is using an image source tag and just using an image that's hosted on whatever CDN or whatever asset server that you have. And when you do this, the benefits are that you kind of get to count how often people get to view the images. Now, the disadvantages doing things this way are that when you send an email to someone in Gmail or in some email clients, they don't display these images by default, and for good reason, because when you request an image from an image asset server, your IP address is logged, right? It's good for them because you get analytics about who's seeing the email, but not everyone displays images. So there are benefits to using an inline image, because once you use an inline image, even though you don't get the analytics, people will always see the image. So here, the format is to use CID : and the name of the image, and we'll get to what it means to have a name of an image. So back in code.js, the next line, I'm going to set the date variable. Again, I'm just using utilities.formatDate to show I only care about month, day, and year. I'm going to use mailapp.sendEmail. This is very familiar because this is just something we've taken out of the tutorial. I'm setting it to myself. I'm setting the title to Daily Fundraising Report. I'm not setting a text body. You can and should, because not all email clients will render HTML. So we're going to use the last parameter to pass an HTML body. And you'll notice I'm using template.evaluate, but I'm doing one more thing. I'm doing .getContent. You don't typically need to do .getContent when you're doing an HTML service, but we're forcing it to render the template as a string, because HTML body takes a string. So we're going to take template.evaluate.getContent, turn it into a string, passing to the HTML body parameter. There's another parameter called inline images, which takes in a JavaScript map. And this is where we had the word chart, right? Oops, excuse me. And chart here is, we're using this again in report template. So if I want to name this chart fundraising, for this to work correctly, I would need to save that, come back to code, and name this a chart_fundraising. And for this, I'm using charts. I'm using 0 because that's the first chart. There's only one chart. And I'm doing .getBlob. Inline images takes a blob.
And that's because earlier you got all charts.
That's right.
And now you're referencing the first chart.
Earlier up here, I'm seeing varCharts equals sheet.getCharts. So I could just as easily say varchart equals sheet.getCharts and then just return the first index, like so. But it was an arbitrary decision on my part. So I'm going to go ahead and run this function now. I'm going to go ahead and run this email report. I could run this, but I'm actually not going to. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and schedule a trigger. And I have this set right now so it emails every night at 3 a.m. And again, I did this by clicking Add a New Trigger, select an email report, time-driven, And you'll see that because I'm actually attached to a spreadsheet now, I have the from spreadsheet option as well. You're seeing up here I have an on form submit handler. We'll get to that real soon, but not yet. I want this run every day, 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. So let's save this bad boy. And what does this look like? Well, we can wait for it, or I can just show you guys. So I'll just show you guys. This is my test email account. When I click on daily fundraising report, this is from yesterday. You'll see, hey, you know, Arun's raised $20. Eric's raised a lot of money. That guy's he's a go-getter. And that's how you schedule a nightly report using AppScript and spreadsheets.
Oh, very cool. And then every time the data modifies, the next time the trigger runs, it'll be a new chart.
That's right. That's a very good point, which is that what's nice about this report is that it's taking the latest data from the spreadsheet. So when I do update the spreadsheet, when I do run this chart's going to look totally different because everyone's going to presumably raise more money. I mean, it's a problem if anyone's funds raise is dropping, right? It means you're losing commitments, not closing.
This way you're staying on top of it, and then you can blame that person.
You're staying on top of it and not blame them, you help them, right? We're a team now. So that's how to use triggers to generate a nightly report. Now, I mentioned that there's also form-based triggers and other types of triggers that you can run. Excuse me. And there are a few types of triggers here. And you'll see that, let me go ahead and demonstrate. So in this spreadsheet, I have, I'm going to use a clear one. Excuse me. Oh, never mind. So there are 4 types of triggers that you can put that are spreadsheet based. One is on install, on open, and on edit. So let's say that you want some code to be executed every time you open a spreadsheet. Well, let's do this. Function on open. And you would define something in here. And when you take a look to see current script triggers, you'll see that by naming it on open, you've automatically defined that function as the function you want to run every time the script is opened. So it's the same thing with onEdit. When you define a function called onEdit in a spreadsheet attached script, you look in triggers, you'll see that it's automatically attached to the script's triggers. Now, if I want to rename this onEdit super, it's no longer named onEdit. So what happens to the trigger? Well, let's take a look. Let's go to resources, current script triggers. It's gone. It's no longer an automatic script that will run. So I'm going to have to click add new trigger, pick onEdit super from spreadsheet, and click onEdit.
And for those of you out there who are thinking, where am I going to find all these, the special function names? You can go to the AppScript documentation, and you can look up what are all the special functions that automatically become these trigger functions.
Fortunately, there are only 3: on install, on open, and on edit. On install is what happens when someone installs your script from the script gallery. So the problem, there are limitations here, right? You can only do certain things in onOpen and onEdit. For those of you that have defined custom spreadsheet menus, you're already familiar with onOpen because you'll see something like var spreadsheet is equal to spreadsheet app dot get active spreadsheet, and you'll say spreadsheet dot add menu, right? And that's typically what you want to do in an onOpen hook. Sometimes you want to be annoying and you want to say something like ss dot browser dot message box. Don't mess with this script. And browser.messagebox pops up a little message box on top of your spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to double check under resources, current script triggers, and oh, sure enough, it's there. Let's remove onEdit super because the function no longer exists. Now I'm going to go back to spreadsheet. I'm going to refresh this. So I'm hitting Command R right now. And it's loading. Firing up the spreadsheet, fire up scripts, and there's my pop-up box. Don't mess with this script. So you can do a lot of things in onOpen, and close the window. So tools, script editor, that's how you get to script editor from a spreadsheet. And we're opening this up right now. Let's just discard the draft. We don't care about that. So you've got a lot of limitations when you're using onOpen and onEdit, and there's good reasons for this. First off, you can't ask a user, you can't say who's the current user, right? You can't send an email. You can't open a user's drive. In fact, the only things you can do in onOpen and onEdit are edit the spreadsheet itself. You cannot edit a different spreadsheet. And the reason for this is that you don't prompt the user for the permissions, right? So the only things that you should be able to do are edit the spreadsheet. So the downside here is that you can't have an on open or an on edit that says every time this is edited, email me. So, or I'm sorry, yeah, you can't email the user. Like, that's not something you can do. However, you can say every time you edit, add a timestamp to the currently edit row. Or every time you open a spreadsheet, add a menu. And typically what you would do instead is you would create in onOpen, you would create a menu that on clicking the menu, then the user authorizes your script so that you can access user's drive, access other spreadsheets, basically just work on behalf of the user. But you cannot work on behalf of the user in onOpen or onEdit, as in you can't access email, you can't access drive, you can't access docs, you can't access anything else. So that's how you do that. So let's talk about the very special one, which is on form submit. And this is the one that we very commonly use anytime we work with forms. So again, let's go back to our fundraising spreadsheet. We've got two tabs. One is for fundraising, and the second one is for donations. So donations, I've created a Google form under form, edit form, and it's because I've already created this. That's why you're seeing this right now. So you're seeing that when I hit edit form, well, basically this collects a name, email, and a donation amount, and that's all I really want. So I'm going to close this window. And when we go to live form, you'll see that this is what my form looks like. It's a fundraising, it's a form that tells people, hey, give me your name and give me your email and what your donation amount is. So let's go ahead and try doing this right now. Right? I have, excuse me, I'm not going to demo this yet. So I have this wired up to an app script to send an email to whoever fills out the form if you give me a correctly formed email address. So let's go ahead back to onFormSubmit. Now, onFormSubmit is not one of these magic function names. You have to go into Resources, click Current Script Triggers, select the function from Spreadsheet, and click on Form Submit. So you have to do that. There's no magical name that you can do to make this thing work. Once you hit Save, whenever someone submits the form, it'll execute the code in whatever function you've defined to execute. So in this case, there are better ways of doing this. You can do e.values to return the form values as an array. You can also use name parameters. There are lots of things that you can do here. So I suggest that you check out the triggers documentation for an exhaustive list of how to get at the parameters. But for now, we're just going to use an array for clarity. So each one of these values corresponds to a spreadsheet column. And spreadsheet columns are what we call one index. So the very first column here is 1, 2, 3, 4. However, this is a JavaScript array, and sometimes this mismatch can be a little bit confusing. A JavaScript array, it's like a European floor. It starts at 0. So we're going to start at 0, 1, 2, 3. So we go back here, and timestamp is now column 0. Name is column 1, email is column 2, and donation is column 3. So we're going to create variables for this just for code clarity. You don't have to do this. I do this because when someone's reading my code, they know what's going on. Again, I'm going to use the HTML service trick with create template from file. Now I'm going to set two variables, name and amount. So let's take a look at notification template.html. And you can always create HTML files by going to File, New HTML file. So here I've created a basic HTML file that says, thank you for your donation. Dear name, which is going to be a variable I'm going to inject. Thank you for your generous donation of some dollar amount. So we're going to go ahead and inject that dollar amount, and I'm going to sign this because I'm very grateful that you donated money. So this is all wired to when a form submits, and when this is done, I'm going to send an email, I'm going to thank you for your donation, and I'm going to say htmlbody.template evaluate get content. So let's go ahead and do this now. And how much should we donate? We're Michael Moneybags.
Well, I know this is a very rich guy. He's a good friend of mine, so.
Let's donate
$1 billion.
$1 million. Why would you donate $1 billion when you could donate $1 million?
Sure.
All right, this is a little silly joke for those of us who are kind of, never mind, Austin Powers generation. So I'm going to hit submit, and it's just a standard form output that says, hey, your response has been recorded. So when we go back to the spreadsheet, we see that Michael Moneybags has committed to donating $1 million to our cause. And you notice that the commas went in. This is a nice little spreadsheet feature. You can format a row. So I've selected this row, and I've gone to, this is always format, number, and just selected currency. So if I select currency with cents, any new thing that comes in will be formatted with currency with commas, $, cents. So let's go ahead and check my email inbox. Oh, I've got a new email. What could this be? I'm Michael Moneybags. Dear Michael Moneybags, thank you for the generous donation of $1 million. One thing to notice is that this is not formatted the same way it's formatted in the spreadsheet. That's because internally it's still saved as the value 1000000. Spreadsheet formats are purely view only. So if I want to format this so it looks nicer, I'm going to have to go ahead and manually format this thing before I send it out to the template. So keep that in mind, that the number you get is not going to look exactly the same as the number you get inside the spreadsheet. It's like right here, I'm just setting the amount, and the raw value I entered, if you remember, it's just this number. So that's why it looks like that in the email, and it looks different from the spreadsheet. OK, so that's kind of, oops, that's the next part. Don't look, it's a secret. So there are a couple things to know about working with triggers, right? Triggers do have CPU limits, so you can't just write a trigger that runs for days, right? So a trigger will time out around the 5-minute mark. It'll probably go a little bit longer than that. And also, if you run 10,000 jobs a day, you're probably going to run out of quota. So you can't just use triggers as a way of doing infinite computation. You need to think about what you're doing and kind of balance things out. With triggers, when you want to return the user it's running as, you want to use session.getEffectiveUser, because it's not an active user, it's an effective user. It's who am I running as opposed to who's actually on the computer, like typing away, pushing buttons and whatnot. Two things that I haven't talked about yet that I will demonstrate right now are all my triggers and email notifications. So when you're in a script editor, sometimes, like me, you might be working on 5 or 6 scripts at once, and you don't know what triggers are running. And that's why there's an All My Triggers resource. So if you go to Resources, All Your Triggers, and I'm in a totally different app right now, you'll see that I've returned all of my triggers across all my different applications. And
also the ones we created with the other script as well.
That's right. That's right. Like I have the email gcal trigger right here. And let's go ahead and cancel it. So you're no longer going to get congratulatory emails. So we're going to save this. That's really nice. The other nice thing is that when you go to either all my triggers or triggers, I've kind of been glazing over this notifications thing. And what's nice about this is that you can set up notifications so that when there are errors in your script, you get an email. And there are no errors in anything that I write because I'm me. Kidding. But sometimes you might get invalid input, or there might be a bug in your code. And it's very important that you want to get notified. So when you have a notification, you might want to be notified that there's an error. And under the notification, you have various options. You might want to be notified every time, immediately when there's an error. And if you have a low volume usage script, you sometimes want this because someone used your script, it doesn't work. You don't want them to call you, right? Like you want to be on it. You want to be on top of that thing. So you go ahead and click immediately, and whenever there's a failure, you'll get the failure right away. Like maybe a common failure is, let me show you guys something. Oops.
And it's still good practice to run your trigger function before, just to test it, make sure everything works. But this is also a good catch. If there is some kind of asynchronous error, then you'll get notified.
Right.
Of it.
When you get an error, it looks something like this. You get this is a summary email, but it'll tell you all the errors. It'll tell you what the error message was, and it'll say that, what caused it and what time it was. So this isn't a lot of information, but one of the patterns that you can use is if you know there's some place that you're trying to debug, put a try-catch block around it. And when it does blow up, then go ahead and email out a stack trace, because sometimes a stack trace is more useful. But we would completely blow up your inbox if we were to do that every single time. And you want to record relevant values, as in what are the values that might have caused this error. So you're going to want to go ahead and build that. So again, the other values here, all your triggers, notification. Besides immediately, you have hourly, daily, and weekly. So sometimes, most of the time, I just want notifications daily, how many errors there were, right? And occasionally there's 1 or 2, and such is life, right? Like that's just the user putting in wrong input or something. And that's why I might want it daily instead of immediately. But then again, it just depends on the volume of script and what kind of debugging you want, what kind of notifications you want. So that's how you can add error notifications to your triggers, because when you're running a script, what I call interactively, you get the error right away. You can dig into it right away. But when script is being run as a trigger, there's no other way of kind of figuring out when it's bombing out or when there are errors. So that's why you want to use a notification functionality to kind of debug your script when there's problems. Everything good so far?
Yeah, makes sense.
Good. Good. So let's talk about things you can't do. I touched on this earlier, but again, you cannot use onInstall, onOpen, and onEdit to do anything beyond accessing the spreadsheet they're contained by. You can't send emails. You can't access users' drive. You can only edit the spreadsheet. On form submit and on clock triggers, these run as a user that installed the trigger. So if your app programmatically creates a trigger for a different user, it runs as a client trigger, so as a client user. So let's say I create a web application and Colleen comes and he clicks some button. Well, the trigger now runs under him and not under me, and I'll show you guys what I mean by this. So here's a web app I've written. It is in one of these windows. Cancel. Cancel. So I called a schedule trigger from a web app, and I created this just at script.google.com. It's got a do-get handler, and it creates a single button that says schedule a trigger that creates a trigger that emails me every 1 minute. When it calls email me, again, I call session.getEffectiveUser. Who's the user I'm running as? And I'm sending an email that says, you're getting this because of a button. Hi there. So if I go ahead and I deploy this thing, it looks like this. Publish the app. Oops. Do not publish it to gallery. People commonly mix this up with deploy as web app. I've done it a couple times by accident. So here's the current web app URL. So let's open a new window like so. And it's going to load a single button that says schedule something for me. Schedule a trigger. All right, that's fine. But right now, as you can see, I'm logged in as my test account. So let's log in as a different test account. So this is a different test account. This is dino-dinosaur.test. I just copy pasted the URL. And the first thing I'm going to see is an authorization dialog, because this is a web app. So I'm going to say, oh, this script wants access to send email, and it also wants permission to subscribe to external events, as in schedule more triggers. So I'm going to authorize this. It's going to take me to the web app, and it looks exactly the same. And I'm going to schedule a trigger. That's all it does. I should have set some feedback or something, but this is a demo application, right? So I've gone ahead and I've scheduled a trigger, and what you'll see is that you'll get an email that says, oh, hey, you just installed a web application. Here's how you uninstall it. So in about a minute, I'll start getting emails. And there you go. There's my first email. You are getting this because of a button. A trigger has been scheduled for me that's emailing dino-dinosaur.test. And if I go to test script, this is nothing. I just save this so I can look at the current script's trigger. There are no triggers for the current script because I didn't set any up. This is a blank script. But if I go to resources, all your triggers, oh, well, I have an email me trigger. It's not attached to a script. So I want to cancel this. So there are two things I can do. I can either go back to this notification email, more information, and click on uninstall, or I can just go here and delete the email me trigger. And this will, excuse me, and yeah, that'll kill the trigger off. So again, let's flow through that again. If I click schedule a trigger, it's already, ooh, wow, I zoomed in a lot there. Resources all your triggers. I pushed a button twice, so just kind of, and now I can cancel it like so, and click save. And that'll get rid of the triggers. So
this running as the user executing it, will this also have implications for a quota of certain things?
Yes. So when it runs, it will use up your user's quota. Okay. So because it runs at you, it uses your quota. It doesn't, unless, for instance, you saw it when I published the application. I said run it as the end user. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. If I execute it as me, ekailan.test@gmail.com, it's going to use my quota.
Okay. So there's usages for both. One is, if you don't want to run over the amount of emails you can send every day, you can have it run as the user and then use their quota instead.
Exactly. And the thing about that is that when I go here and I click send email, you see that, oh, well, this is running as ekilan.test, whereas when it runs as you, mail app sends as you too. So this is coming from dino.dinosaur.test. When I go to sent mail, it's running as the second user.
Gotcha.
So it's not just that you want, it's not just for quota reasons. The main reason should not be quota related. The main reason should be you want to run it as you, right?
Okay.
Like you want someone to sign up and get update notifications on, I don't know, the latest documents coming into your drive or whatever. Okay. So let's go and talk about some advanced patterns. Oops. So there are 3 patterns I want to talk about, and of where you would use triggers outside of the examples I've shown you. One is when you want to chain long-running jobs. Like right now, as you know, there's a limit to how long a trigger can run. So let's say you want to run a job that's going to take, say, an hour. Well, how would you do that? Well, you really can't right now, but you can with triggers. And what you would do is you would create a trigger that runs every 5 minutes or so and just goes ahead, and when it's done executing, it executes the next block. So you might want to save like a pointer to where you are in your job and just keep moving. And you save that either in a property or in scriptdb. And that's how you would do a long-running job. And when you're done with the job, you can programmatically create triggers. You can also unschedule triggers. So let's talk about how to do that.
And so just to be clear, you would want to do this because there is an established limit on how long each execution can be.
Exactly. You have a total CPU time you can use up for your triggers. And sometimes you just don't want a runaway trigger, right? Like if you want a user to be able to cancel all their triggers, for instance, you can write a trigger that says kill all triggers. And you don't have to name it this. What you would do is you would do script app dot get script triggers. This returns an array of all the triggers. You can iterate through this. Oops, there's a syntax error here. And this would cancel all the triggers. So triggers, when I pick the trigger it's currently working on, I would just say, oops, you would delete the trigger via script app. So you would say script app dot delete trigger and pass it the current trigger, right? And this deletes all the triggers. It's like a big red panic button. But really, sometimes you only want to delete a specific trigger. So that's when you would put in a conditional like this. Triggers, the current one, and you would say, well, what's the handler function, right? If the handler function is email me, go ahead and delete the trigger. And there's one more way you could do this, which is that triggers have something called a unique ID, get unique ID. And this is unique globally. This is unique across all scripts for all users. So at the time of trigger creation, what you might want to do is say trigger.getUniqueID. Save this somewhere like in scriptdb or in properties, and that way, if you've got a bunch of different triggers running for a bunch of different people, you can just go ahead and if getUniqueID matches the one in scriptdb, delete that trigger. So that's typically how you would want to programmatically kind of unschedule triggers.
Okay.
So there's one more pattern, which is, I said before that you cannot set up triggers in onOpen. You cannot, when you copy a spreadsheet, it does not copy over the triggers. So if I go here to the spreadsheet that I created, demo fundraising, and I made a copy of this, make a copy demo fundraising. And right now, this is a total copy of the spreadsheet for the most part, except when I go to Tools, Script Editor. And scripts take a few seconds to copy, so this might not have copied yet. But fortunately, I was slow, so it did it. You'll see that it's copied all the code, but when I go to Resources, Current Script Triggers, only the onOpen and onEdit triggers are set up. We don't have the trigger that says run this every hour, run this every minute, run this at midnight. That's not copied over. So this is problematic if your workflow is to create a spreadsheet and you have people in your organization make a copy of it, because you often want them to copy the time-based triggers too. So what do we do about this? Well, a common pattern that I do is I use onOpen to create a menu. In the menu, I say set up a spreadsheet, and I store inside script properties or user properties or wherever that says you have created the triggers or you have not created the triggers. Alternatively, and what you do, you can't access those inside onOpen. But what you can do is you can you create a menu item that says schedule set up this script. So you go ahead and you click the menu item, you say set up script, it's going to ask you for authorization, and at that point, it's going to go ahead and schedule the triggers for you.
Nice.
And because you have functions like get script triggers, you can look to see if the trigger's already been set up. So you can run through it, you can say, does this trigger exist? Yes, no. If it does, set it up. If not, don't set it up. Because if I run schedule trigger again and again, if I run schedule trigger 3 or 4 times, I will create 3 or 4 triggers. Because again, you can attach multiple triggers to the same function.
So basically, it would just run the function that many times.
Exactly. So a trigger is kind of like me creating a memo that says, do this job. And you create 5 copies of the memo, and I give it to Eric. And if Eric takes things very literally, he will do the job 5 times. Right? Fortunately, Eric will just come back to me and say, what are you doing, man? What is this? But this is a computer, so with a computer you have to be very, very specific about what you want it to do. And that's why triggers have this get unique ID function, so that if I give him 5 memos, each memo has an ID that says, this is ID 1, this is ID 2, this is ID 3, and he knows, oh, these are different jobs. And you can do the same thing when you're managing triggers, that once you know the ID, you know that they're different, unique triggers. Okay,
cool.
And that's what I have for patterns so far. There are definitely many more patterns. These 3 are the ones that tend to be the most common. So I just like to talk about these a lot. And that's what I have for you guys today. If you guys have any more ideas for shows you want to see, do let us know. We have more shows happening this week and next week as well. So again, my email address is ikai@google.com, or Kalian's is gkal@google.com. You can email him. It's appeared in this demo multiple times. So do you have any questions so far?
No, I think triggers are a great way, for example, to get around some things like making a long-running job.
Right. And now you're going to use them. Now you're going to use them every day.
All the time.
All the time.
I'm going to set up a trigger to email myself and remind myself how cool I am.
All right. So when we started the show, no one was asking questions on Google Moderator. So let's go ahead and. Apparently, the status of this has changed. So we're going to go a little bit over the time limit for the show. Originally, we were set up to go for 45 minutes. But let's take a look to see what questions people have. I'm always nervous about live questions, mostly because people ask something, don't know how to answer it. I'm not going to click play because that's going to cause some crazy feedback. I like a trigger for on-close. Given the 3 triggers available, is there a way to trick one into being an on-close? Maybe. I'm not sure about this, actually.
I don't think it would work in the same way, because the containing spreadsheet is no longer open.
Right. I think that I was originally thinking about something with onEdit. When edits stop for more than a certain amount of time, then maybe someone has closed your spreadsheet, but that's not really good. So
could you do something like, yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I don't think there's a way. I don't think there's a good way of doing this. But definitely put in a feature request, and we'll figure out why there is or isn't a way of doing this now. I remember hearing something about why there wasn't an uninstall, right? But do open a feature request, and we'll check this one out.
And a close-up approximation is set up a time-based trigger that will go back and clean up all the tasks, like whatever you want to do there. Maybe you want to clean up some of the fields or format something differently. You can do it on a time trigger. Just go back and do that same thing.
Right. Okay. The next question is, will the emails created with these triggers get stored in a sent folder in Gmail? If I'm running a trigger as myself and I use Mail app, yes, it will be in my sent folder. If it's coming from Kalian and it's executing as him, they'll be in his sent folder. And the third question is, I just want to create social site. Well, that's good for you, and I wish you luck in your endeavors. All right. So I think that's it for now. If you have any more questions, we're going to wrap the show up, but we're doing office hours this Thursday. If you're watching the show live this Thursday, and we do them every Thursday or most Thursdays, just go to developers.google.com/live and look for AppScript office hours. We do them almost every week, so check us out and join us.
And you can always go to our Stack Overflow, post it against our tag. We're pretty active there, and also the issue tracker if you come up with any issues.
That's right. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. All right. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.